Well, hello once again, and welcome to yet another edition of Get Me The Brandy. I am joined by the old 2-9er, Phil Bourque. How are you, buddy?
I'm well, Dan. I got the warm and fuzzies there, just hearing Mikey on the intro,
Yep.
and it has a special place in my heart. Anything that's connected to the great Mike Lang, I get a little emotional, of course.
I could not agree more, but despite the warm and fuzzies, I must admit that my coffee this morning is a little bitter. The
Ooh,
Penguins are currently in the midst of a 6-game winless streak in a very difficult homestand where we did not see a W. And according to Bob Grove, that has never happened before. They have never had a 5-game homestand where they have failed to produce a W. Eric Carlson said it's more of a mindset right now because I think that's focused on the breakdowns they've had in the third period, which we saw over the weekend. Uh, I'll ask you as a former player, how does a team push by or push through a
yeah.
little funk like this or a big funk?
Yeah, I know, Dan. It's hard to believe too. You almost feel like you're living a nightmare. That this team is too good. It's too well constructed. I really do feel like Kyle Dubas has done a great job of putting a team together. Listen, they went 8-2-2 in October. They didn't just forget how to win hockey games. And with all that being said, you can't just you know excuse the phrase here, but throw the baby out with the bathwater because they did so many good things in mostly first two periods, right? 40 minutes of play. They do so many great things, at times dominant during those games. And to watch it just be like, sand through an hourglass and painfully sand through the hourglass, just kind of blow up on them. It's hard to put your finger on just one thing. And I kind of do lean into what Eric Carlson was saying that, yeah, there's some X's and O's and decision making and all that, but and you like me, painfully watch Dan Muse have to go to the podium again and feel like in no way, shape, and form did I ever think I was going to be back here again talking about this again. And you're right. I use the phrase you've heard me say it before. We are the Penguinis, right? And I say it kind of tongue in cheek a little bit because we do some things that are incredibly amazing, record breaking, right? We've had some of the greatest players to ever play this game play here in Pittsburgh. So we've done some great things. We've had some great history and some great records, but also we've done some horrific things. And to lose, I mean, been some bad teams in the National Hockey League, bad Pittsburgh Penguin teams, I should say. I was a part of them in the early '80s, and to lose five straight in a 5-game homestand, those teams did not even do it. In fact, it was only done 2 other times where they lost the first 4. One was a 2001 team, which was not that great, but the other was a 1983 team that lost 4 straight. They didn't lose 5 straight. So for that to be record breaking, I also read something, Dan, that we're the first team in the history of the National Hockey League to lose back-to-back games when you had a 3 or more goal lead in the third period. So again, for me, I tried to put myself in their position of, okay, what's going on here? What would I be feeling? And I think you remember me as a player. I was out there in a lot of those situations. I was more of a defensive guy than an offensive guy. So I had earned that trust of my head coach to be out there in those final minutes or end of a period, with the lead, and about the decision making, about reading the room, about kind of taking what is given and paying that price. And I always think, like, some players will say, "I'll do anything to win, Dan," but really, will they do anything? And maybe they don't know what it takes. But again, I lean back into October when they did know how to finish off games. So to me, it's a mindset. To me, it's an urgency. But more than anything else, it's a pride. It's a pride thing that I want to be one of the guys that puts this game away, finishes it off. And I think there's too many guys that are having the what ifs, and it's creeping up on them, and they're a little bit frozen in their tracks.
You mentioned earlier what's happened over this past weekend with the third period breakdowns. And I think you and Jay mentioned it on the postgame show, which we did together over the weekend. It was connected to Bill Murray and Groundhog Day
Yeah,
as Dan Muse went to the podium. Like, here we go again, really? Like, what? But you
yeah,
also said something about not being able to maybe put your finger on one thing. Well, here's one thing that has been uh, what's going on moment, the Penguins' record in overtime and the shootout.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know that I remember a team that in Penguins history that has had this much trouble in the extra frame. And if anything at all, and again, I understand it's, we're getting into late December. There's still a lot of hockey left to be played, but there are a lot of points that are being left on the
yeah.
table that the Penguins, I don't want them to have to look back in March and go, well, if we collected some of
Yeah.
those extra
Well,
points,
they coulda, shoulda. Yeah,
yeah. So, like, what's do you practice the shootout more? We've
yeah,
seen it a little bit in Cranberry. You and I have watched it,
yeah,
but you can't recreate, or you can't
yeah.
make that a game situation. It's practice.
Okay, here's what I would say. So the Penguins have not missed out from the playoffs for 3 straight years. Last year, we're going to kind of put that on the side because the Penguins missed the playoffs by 11 points. The year before that, they missed the playoffs by 3 points. Now, what I'm trying to get to, in the year before that, they missed the playoffs by 1 point. What I'm trying to get to is that each of those seasons that the Penguins have missed the playoffs, they're in double digits in losses in overtime or shootout. So let's get to your question. What do you do about it? And you practice it, but you got to make it fun. And listen, I'm not going to go back to Dan Muse has to be like Dan Bylsma, but you remember when Dan Bylsma would practice it all the time. He would make it a competition. He would make it fun. Listen, if you ask this group, who could run a 50-yard dash faster? They'd all line up, and $100 each is on the line. And you get a pot of money, and the fastest one gets. They'd all line up, and they'd be frothing at the mouth. That's how these guys are wired. They're super ultra competitive. It doesn't matter what it is, and so you make it fun and you make it competitive, and you put something on the line. And Dan Bylsma used to do Mustache Boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where whoever lost the shootout had to wear a mustache for a month. Also, they were doing
Burrito
something where you
boy,
had what is it?
burrito boy, coffee boy,
Right.
car
All those
wash boy.
things where you had to sometimes you'd have to serve Gatorade to all your teammates and get genuflect down to one knee and unlace everybody's skates. Silly things like that. They sound silly, but again, they're all in the meaning of making it super competitive. So that's the shootout. As far as the overtime, I would practice it all the time. I would make it a point, beginning of practice, middle of practice, end of practice, change it up a little bit. I do the 4-on-3, where you have a power play, you have to kill a penalty in overtime. All those scenarios, I would practice them not every day, but at least once a week. And I understand with going to Sweden and having an Olympic year that you have taken this schedule and you have just put it in a vice, so you don't have much practice time. And the practices you do have, sometimes they're even optional practices. So you can't do what I'm talking about unless you have the whole team on the ice. And how many times do we have that in a month, Dan? 3, maybe 4 times with the way the schedule is. So again, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, and I hate that. But I do think the answer is it's tough to duplicate it with video. You can go over things, but I think when you play as a player, you really absorb it when you actually visually see it and practice it.
No one gets you ready for puck drop like Penguins Face Off Live. Pre-game insights, analysis, and a word straight from the coach. Penguins Face Off Live before every game on SportsNet Pittsburgh. Presented by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Let's change gears a little bit and talk about something that's been fun to watch. And we've talked about the season for the Big Three, celebrating 20 years together of Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, and Chris Letang. Now it's kind of one spotlight, if you will, shining on Sidney Crosby as he
Right.
chases Mario Lemieux for the all-time points record in the history of the Pittsburgh Penguins. With his point against the Oilers, he's now 1 point shy of tying 66. I can, and again, you've been around as a player watching Mario chase various records or milestones, and of course, as a broadcaster. Uh, Can it get in a player's head a little bit as you draw closer? Can you just, flip the switch and turn off the noise? Can it cloud their mind a little bit as they're trying to focus on the game? And I ask, as the Penguins are going through this stretch, can he enjoy the moment while he's also trying to be the captain of the team that needs to get back in the win column?
Great question. It really is a great question. The way you worded it, because there's different layers to it, right? I think most players, yes, is the short answer. But I think Sid has gone through this so many times, right? with 500 goals, 600 goals, 1,000 points. I mean, the games played, the whole, within the last 5 years, there's been so many milestones for Sid that not that you become numb to it, but you become more accustomed to it and how to handle it and all that. This is a big one for Sid. I'll say that. And to know that Mario was in the house, I don't know if he's there for all five. Was he all five? I think all five.
I know at least the last three.
Last three, right? The last three
Yeah.
for sure. That's meaningful. And I think Sid, he really wanted to do it on home ice. But I think the losses were weighing on him heavily. I don't know if Sid realizes this, but he can't hide his body language. His body language says one thing, and that was frustration for Sid because he hates to lose more than he loves to win, and he loves to win. And I can almost feel it heavy on him. And so all of a sudden, the record of catching Mario for regular season points really becomes secondary, doesn't it? You'd love to get it, but damn, man, you wanted to at least be tied to a win or have some good moments. And I just think there was a lot of frustration for Sid. His dad was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, and that was a team he rooted for. Our next home game will be against the Montreal Canadiens. I don't think it'll take that long. He's 2 behind Mario, right? I think it'll happen really soon. Now 1 point, right? 1 point behind Mario, 2 to pass him.
Right. Yeah.
And we go on the road to Ottawa and to Montreal. I feel it's going to happen there. But I think at this point, I'm giving you a really long answer here to your short question, but I think at this point, he wants to get it behind him. It's something, when he's 60 years old, sitting on a rocking chair on the dock and sipping lemonade, I think he'll really embrace it and enjoy it. But I think right now, he'd like to get it done, get it over with, get the picture, and move on and start winning hockey games.
Real quickly, just to touch on that, the one thing that, and there is a long list of things that has impressed all of us, the way Sidney Crosby has handled himself in many different situations over the years. The one thing that he has continued to say as he's drawn closer and closer to Mario's record is like, well, it's taken me more games when compared to Mario. Mario did it in 900 and change, and he's always been quick to say that, like as a reminder that the game was different then, like when you played, fire wagon hockey back in the 80s and into the early 90s, things were much different. What I'm getting to is that as much as getting the record, I'm sure will be very nice and warm his heart, respect. He has never forgotten that. And it's almost like he's got it on a checklist. Okay, you're asking me that question? Mario did it in 400 fewer games.
Yeah, it's actually 468 games, which if you do the math on it, it's 5.7 seasons. Just take a second and soak that in. It's almost 6 seasons less than Sid for Mario to get to that number. Now, you're right. Goaltenders were not as good. Teams had, fourth lines that could barely skate or stick handle between the two blue lines. And Mario will admit he took full advantage of all of those things. But still, that number is it's mind-boggling. Almost 6 seasons less and how great and consistent Sid has been. And I think that's why Sid makes sure everybody, and you're right, Sid is a historian, right? Especially when it comes to the NHL, the Pittsburgh Penguins, U.S. history, Canadian history. He really appreciates, he soaks it in, he studies it, he appreciates it and he respects it. And so I think that's why, one of the first things you hear out of Sid's mouth is, oh, don't forget, how much longer it's taken me to catch Mario. But, you start to think of like, how much longer is Sid going to play and how much more numbers he's going to put up? And then is there somebody else that might come down the turnpike and catch Sid now? I don't know about that, Dan, because these are getting to be gaudy numbers.
We just saw Edmonton in town, and the Canadian media, obviously, they travel with a large group, especially not only because of the team they covered, but they're coming to Pittsburgh and Sid. And now, as you mentioned, the team's going to Ottawa. They are going to Montreal next week before the break. Toronto, okay. What do you think 87 and 66 have meant to the game of hockey?
Wow.
And I'm not just talking in Canada, but
yeah,
Canada and the
yeah.
United States.
I think for Canada, I find it interesting that both Sid and Mario have had a different relationship with Canada and Canadian hockey than say Wayne Gretzky. There's a kind of an unbridled love for Wayne Gretzky, right? Where there was times there was kind of mixed emotions. If they were wearing that maple leaf playing for Team Canada, yeah, that's our guy. We love you, Sid. We love you, Mario. But when they weren't and they were playing for the Pittsburgh Penguins, there
Yeah.
wasn't this huge embrace, maybe the way there was for Wayne Gretzky. That's just my observation. I do find it interesting that it was for both those guys. But
Yeah.
I think there's both Mario, and you think of the '87 Canada Cup and the big goal that Mario scored, right? And then the Olympics in Vancouver and the golden goal by Sidney Crosby. They have represented not only the Pittsburgh Penguins in the National Hockey League, but the country of Canada in a way that really, when you think of it, nobody else has. Those goals are so monumental. Monumental. Paul Henderson and the goal that he scored is another one that gets brought up. But Sid and Mario, they have walked such a similar path, and that's why we get to these times when people still are bringing up, do you think that Sid will ever play for another team? I don't. I just don't see it, Dan. I don't see it. I think that both of them have put the same sandals on, walked down that same path to greatness, and they just love being a Pittsburgh Penguin. But also they have done some incredible things for the country of Canada. And when you had the Four Nations and Mario came out in Montreal, you remember that, and the
Ooh.
ovation he got. And there have been a while since they have seen Mario. He's just doing this thing. He's just chilling, right, in retirement, and he's earned that. And so for him to be back on that stage, you saw the appreciation. And I think now, as we get into what we think or might be the last few years of Sidney Crosby, I think that Canada now will show more of an appreciation for Sidney Crosby for what he has done, not only as a Pittsburgh Penguin and a member of the National Hockey League, but more importantly for the country of Canada.
Inside Penguins Hockey is back
Let's go eat sushi.
for an all-new season.
And now he's your best friend.
Yeah. Getting a line in the water is always a joy for me.
Inside Penguins Hockey. New episodes every month on SportsNet Pittsburgh. Presented by UPMC Health Plan.
So you mentioned the fact that Mario only wore the black and gold. Sidney Crosby has only worn the black and gold. Let's talk about a couple players now that have changed colors a few times, or at least one has changed a few times. One is now wearing the black and gold, changing out of the Edmonton Oilers orange and blue. And I'm talking about Stuart Skinner and Brett Kulak. And before we get into their debut and what they bring to the team, what was it like for you when you left the Penguins and went to the Rangers and had your first game back against the black and gold?
Oh, it was terrible. Dan. It was awful. I remember it clearly. I was so torn because the first year I went to play for the New York Rangers, the Rangers were not great, and it was kind of turmoil. There was a coaching change. Roger Nielsen was let go, and Ron Smith came in and became the new head coach, and then Mike Keenan was in the wings hanging around. Anyways, my emotions were all over the map. I don't really remember much of the game. I don't think I was great in the game. And you're right. My heart was still here in Pittsburgh. And so I don't know if that would be the same for Tristan Jarry, because the rumors were for so long, right? The anticipation of the other shoe dropping, so to speak. I don't know if there was relief. Whenever you see, whether it's a tribute video or just the tribute that they gave Tristan to kind of give you this one here, it's meaningful. It really means that his heart was all in here, Pittsburgh. It didn't work out for whatever reason, but for different players, it's different emotions. How long were you here? What kind of success did you have here? What kind of ties did you have to your teammates? Did you stick together for a long time as teammates? and your connection to the city. You know, some players have their kids are born here, and that's so meaningful, and that's where their heart is here. But then the business part rips their heart out of their chest and puts it in another city. And so I'm not trying to get too dramatic or emotional about this in any way, shape, or form, but I just remember my first time back here playing at the Igloo, you know, at the Civic Arena, was gut wrenching for me. I didn't enjoy 1 second of it, to get right to the point.
Okay, so let's talk about Stuart Skinner, who made his Penguin debut against his former team, the only team he's ever played for, in the city where he was born and raised,
Right.
in Edmonton. So your thoughts about his showing? And there's a lot. We talked about, you know, Sidney having a lot maybe going on in his head as he pursues Mario's record and tries to get the Penguins back in the win column and point it in the right direction. Your thoughts on his first showing and overall what he brings to the Penguins as they move forward this season?
Yeah, all those things you mentioned, and took that Edmonton team 2 times back to back to the Stanley Cup final, right? And so that's
Yeah.
when I talk about connection, right? I talk about obviously a connection to the city, like you said, he was born there, but the teammates, and I don't know if you saw some of the video of when, you know, before the game, you know, the hugs with Draisaitl and McDavid, even
Yeah.
his head coach, that it was real. And Dan, I think you're a good reader of people, that usually within the first 10 to 20 seconds, you have a pretty good idea about somebody, right? First impressions. And my first impression of him is that great guy, right? But we're not in the good guy business. We're in winning hockey games business. And his first showing, some good, some not so good. You know, it's a crooked number up at the board. You can't get away from that. There's a couple of pucks that you probably thought, man, another chance on those, they don't go in. The one thing I do know, he's a really good goaltender, and he really cares, and he's all in. I don't think you can just take the one game against that offense and the way that McDavid and Draisaitl were just buzzing all over the place, and the Penguins not having their fastball in their A game. It's tough to say, you know, what this might be with Stuart Skinner. The one thing I do know, it's a contract year for him and also for Brett Kulak. He's a big goalie. He moves well for a big goaltender. And to get to the Stanley Cup final twice, you must have been doing something right. So I think, you know, those factors of a new sheet of ice, new teammates, going for a contract, all those things, ask me after about 10 games, I'll probably have a better answer for you. But I'm really excited for Stuart Skinner to be the Penguins goaltender, because I know how talented he is. I know how much he cares about his teammates, about the city, and his teammates, and how much he wants to win.
Before we move on, you know how goaltenders during a timeout will use their stick to clean out the crease?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for him to rip off that duster and just use it as a broom. That is absolutely one of the best mustaches I have ever seen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean,
Oh,
all men are jealous. Like if you can grow a duster like that and just do it, because I mean, this is not Movember, right?
well,
He's doing it because he can, you know, and he's flaunting it. You know, it's impressive, right? That
yep.
there is, there's some guys. I mean, Brian Rust, obviously the Rustache, can grow a good one, but I don't know if there's another dude in the league that can grow one like that just because he can. And he could probably grow it in about 2 or 3 days. It's well done, Stu.
Yeah. Like, I'll just say this: I'm sure when he goes to bed, the mustache has its own bed.
Yeah,
That's all I'm going to say.
sure. Yeah,
That's all I'm going to say. All right, let's
Well
talk
said.
about Kulak. Here's a defenseman that the Penguins acquired, and I don't know, the need for a left-handed, left side defenseman. You know, they got one, and he's a guy that's changed teams a few times. But much like Skinner, had played in back-to-back Stanley Cups, and the guy has not missed a game, and he's closing in on 300, right? 296 and counting.
So, yeah, the 3 previous seasons before this season, all 82 games, and played every game this year. Excuse me, Dan. He's just a solid defenseman, and the kind of guy that, again, not a wonder that you win with guys like him, because they fly underneath the radar. He doesn't put up big numbers. He's not offensive defenseman. He's more defensive minded, skates well, really good first pass. He can be physical. And you're right. He's only played for Canadian teams in Calgary and Montreal. And wherever he's gone, he's had success. And so, yeah, he's a welcome addition. And the pairing, I liked it right off the get-go, him and Jack St. Ivany. I want to see more of it. Again, you can't just take that first game they played together against the Edmonton Oilers and have really any kind of a read off of that. I just want to see more of those two together. I like Jack St. Ivany as a defenseman, and Brett Kulak. I mean, again, with that kind of experience and that kind of a skill set, that those are the kind of guys you win with. And we talk so much about the Penguins' shortcomings of protecting leads. Brett Kulak's one of those guys you want to have on the ice as much as possible to help protect, whether it's a 1, 2, 3, 4-goal lead, whatever it is the Penguins have had and have dropped the ball on in third periods. Brett Kulak's one of those guys that can fix that pretty quick.
Yeah. So what exactly do you think Dan Muse and his staff are looking for in that third defensive pairing? And I guess as I ask you that, how does that group stay together? Because a lot of times it's the top two pairings that kind of get a good role. They're more consistent as far as them playing, and it's the third one that changes out guys. So how do they find that right mix and stick?
No, I think we'll both agree that Ryan Shea is going to stay with Chris Letang, right? And Parker Wilderspoon is going to stay with Erik Karlsson, right? So let's put that on the shelf. Okay, so you've got Brett Kulak, left shot, left D, and Jack St. Ivany, right shot, right D, works, right? But then you also have Connor Clifton still in the mix as a right-hand shot, and Ryan Graves still in the mix as a left-hand shot. And those guys have played well, but you feel like there's another level for both of them. So you have this really healthy competition. If we've taken the top four defensemen and put them on the shelf, for sake of conversation, the bottom four defensemen, the guys I just mentioned, it's internal competition. And so to answer your question, how do we keep them together? It's got to be consistency. It has to be, those guys plus minus means something to those type of players because they're not going to put up the big offensive numbers. So at the end of the day, how many goals are they on the ice for? And how many goals are they on the ice against? And the latter means a whole lot more. So let's just say the next 10 games that Brett Kulak and Jack St. Ivany played together, you would hope that we're talking about 2, maybe just 3, maybe 4 at the most goals against in a 10-game span. I mean, that's something that would really help the Penguins get their defensive chops back again by having that anchor, guys that you can really trust. Guys are just going to lock it down. And then also you add in the level of penalty killing that you would expect from guys that are more defensive minded as blue liners. That goes into that job description also. So they're both very capable of what I just talked about. But again, when you have Graves and you have Clifton waiting in the wings, you don't want them sitting too long either.
Right.
And that's the thing about internal competition. It's something that you have to really enjoy, embrace. You're just like, yeah, come on, bring it on. I'm going to show you. I'm not the guy you're going to take out of the lineup. Take somebody else out of the lineup because I know those guys are waiting in the wings, but you're not taking my job. I'm going to show you I want to be a game in and game out guy you can trust every time.
Before we get away from the two new guys, just curious, as a player, you've seen it when other players had been acquired by the Penguins, came over, they were let go or moved for whatever the reason may have been, but they seemed to a change of scenery, a new uniform, different teammates, where the team is in the standings, has ignited their play, has helped them harness what they, or help them harness what used to be maybe their highest level of play. What is it about changing that can allow a player to all of a sudden, hey, I can now go up and play at this level?
Yeah, every player is different when it comes to that. But more times than not, we see a player excel, right, when he gets a new scenery. And sometimes that's all it is. It's a new locker room. It's a new color scheme on your jerseys, right? It's a new way you drive to the rink. It's a new house that you're living in. All that new is got you invigorated. It's like you going out and buying all your new fancy suits that you wear. Like you always got a little different walk in your step because it's new and it's shiny and you look good in it. And so maybe sometimes it's simple as that. Sometimes a lot more goes into it. You move to a place, and this is also a part of it for some guys, is if your family was not that happy at your previous employment and you go to a place for whatever reason, maybe it's weather, maybe it's neighborhood, maybe it's the other wives and girlfriends and your family get along with, there's so many different things that can go into the happy life, which makes your game better. But then other players, sometimes they take it personal, right? So if you get traded from one team and maybe you really wanted to be there and they say, no, we're moving you on, they take that personal. And again, they want to prove their prior employer that you were wrong, man. You made a big mistake, and that benefits the new team. And then also it might be a contract situation, where a player gets moved because they're going to be an unrestricted free agent. And so again, you have the opportunity of a team moving you, saying we don't want you anymore. We don't want to sign you, and we don't want you anymore. We're going to move you for whatever reason. Again, you take that personal, and sometimes there's a little bit of a Michael Jordan thing, right? Where you kind of fabricate things, to motivate yourself, which is also, I think, a healthy thing. I did it myself at times, or I would take little things, I'd make them bigger things internally to drive myself and push myself to try to get to a next level. So a lot goes into it. Sometimes we see it go the other way, but where players, their play decreases more times than not. You make a great point. We see it in all sports, right? But there's so much movement and trades in hockey that we see a lot of times where a player goes to a new team, and then people from the old team go, whoa, wait a minute. Where was that player? Hey, why didn't that guy play like that for us? Well, certain situations, certain teammates, and whatever, maybe just the visual part of it, and taking it personal that somebody has moved you can highly motivate athletes, especially hockey players.
Is the giddy up in my step when I'm wearing a nice suit that noticeable?
It is, Dan. Yeah, there's a certain bounce. I'll take some pictures and take some videos and show you what I'm talking about. It's
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I
thought
told
I
you
was
that
hiding
before.
it. I thought
The
I hid
carousel of suits that you have, I know when the new ones come out because you're a completely different person.
Oh, wow, but I'm still me, right?
You're always still you, of course.
Okay. So in talking about players joining a new team, new surroundings, and new faces and new places, the Penguins are celebrating, if you will, the 2016 Stanley Cup Championship.
Oh, yeah.
And it was around this time in that season when we saw some new faces. Trevor Daley came over and joined the Penguins, and then the Penguins called up Connor Jarry and Matt Murray. Let's kind of go back, or let's go back and talk about the difference that those three players made. Let's start with Dale's and just the presence that he made for that team, or had for that team. And I guess one word comes to mind: speed.
Yeah. Right. Hey, you look at those players, and Matt Murray, obviously a goaltender, but Connor Jarry too. Common theme was speed, right? And it was already a speedy team that they had with Carl Hagelin and Phil Kessel and the likes, right? Again, at the time, and I don't want this to sound like a negative swipe to Rob Scuderi because he did so much as a Pittsburgh Penguin, but he wasn't at his best, okay? And he had a heavy contract at the time, which a lot of people thought was unmovable, just because his play at that moment, around that time they made the deal, was not at his best. But somehow Jimmy Rutherford found a partner, right? And I remember Trevor Daley was not playing in Chicago under Joel Quenneville. He was either a healthy scratch or playing very limited minutes. I forget which one it was, but rarely getting on the ice under Joel Quenneville. So a bit of a perfect storm, right, on that trade there, where Chicago said, we'll take a chance on Rob Scuderi. He's a guy that we could use on our team. And Trevor Daley looked at it, and I just talked about opportunity of a fresh sheet of ice, fresh teammates. This team plays more like I play. And you're right, Trevor Daley, exceptional skater for a defenseman, right? And to be in an elevated role and really be embraced by that locker room at the time, because I think the guys in the room, Dan, knew, wow, this guy fits with what we're trying to do. And again, there's the on ice chemistry, but sometimes you need the off ice chemistry first for the on ice chemistry. And I think that happened first with Daly. His personality just fit in that room perfectly. And a guy that had success in the league before, so he had experience in the league before. And just because things went sour in Chicago didn't mean it had to continue. And it was just a perfect fit. And Connor Sherry, an undrafted, diminutive forward that looked at it. Really, he's done it his whole career, but really early on in his career, a guy that came out of nowhere, and that was also right, Dan. It was somebody that we had no idea who Connor Sherry was, but Mike Sullivan knew who he was as he coached him down in Wilkes-Barre before he got the promotion up to the Penguins. He knew everything about him, and also about Brian Rust, and then later Jake Gensel in the following year. But to identify those players of right fit for this team at this time, and then for those players, whether it's Daly or whether it's Sherry, and also Matt Murray, who again as a goaltender, in there with Marc-Andre Fleury, that's another whole conversation, right? But as far as Daly and with the forwards, I just think it was the right place, right time, and those players fully took advantage of the opportunity.
Just to get back to Connor for a moment, he gets his number called, and it didn't take much time. He's skating on the Penguins' top line with Sidney Crosby, and you mentioned Rust. He joined that line as well. I remember watching that team go with those two guys, and I'm stating the obvious here. Everybody that gets on a line with Sidney Crosby looks better. They play better. And I think it's a credit to Sid, obviously, what he can do, but that player deserves some credit as well. As a kid, if you will, getting the call up and getting on that line.
Yeah.
That's almost a pinch me moment. And then you have to find a way to perform.
Yeah. Great question. And that's what, and that's why those guys are still playing. Even Connor Sherry. I mean, I know he's been fighting for contracts, and he's in New York right now. But and that's the thing, is you get over the wow factor of playing with Sidney Crosby real quick if you have that internally of, I can't be just stuck in the mud here just watching Sid. This is an unbelievable opportunity, and all those players that you talked about took full advantage of that opportunity. And you're right, for Connor Sherry to be smaller player, undrafted, you would think, okay, maybe he'd have an adrenaline rush and have a couple good games with Sid, but no, he was able to continue on with Sid, and yeah, whether it was Rusty or any of the other guys that played with Sid, they had the skill set to play with Sid, and that's the number one thing, because some people think it's hard to play with Sid. It's not really hard to play with Sid. You just need a certain mindset. Number one, you can't be intimidated by playing with Sid, but you respect playing with Sid. But more importantly, you need to have the skill set and know how to use it. And it's really simple stuff. It's just not too many players can apply it and do it consistently. And that is to have the speed in the legs, have the conditioning to play with Sid because he plays at such a high pace for 60 minutes. And also to play the give and go game, which Sid absolutely loves to do. And all those players could do that.
I want to close with Matt Murray real quickly. And I don't remember, again, you've been around much longer than I as player and broadcaster. Not only did he join the Penguins, but he played at such an unbelievable level so quickly. And not only did he help the Penguins win in 16, he came back and did it again in 17. Yeah. What were your thoughts when you were watching, this tall goaltender who's about, this thick play as well as he did so quickly?
Play big. Yeah, and play big, right? And you're right. We'd see him out of uniform, be just like, oh, is this the same guy? Is there somebody else that climbs inside that gear? He had the ability. You know what he had, Dan? He had an attitude, and he had a confidence. And sometimes this can be unhealthy, but if you really walk that line of confidence and cockiness, not arrogance, because that's too far past cockiness, right? He had the confidence and the cockiness of, get out of the way. This is my net. And you're right. Even when, you had to make that hard decision in 2017, right? With Marc-Andre Fleury and Matt Murray and the conference final against Ottawa, right? He didn't flinch. He did not flinch at all. And at times, especially in the playoffs, the bigger the game, the bigger the moment, you could see it in his eyes. You could feel it in his body language. He had ice water running through his veins where it didn't matter the moment. He just had this incredible confidence that I'm just going to win. I'm going to stop everything they throw at me. And even you fast forward to that series against Nashville for the Stanley Cup, the last two games, he pitches a shutout, right? In games 5 and 6, he just had the it. He just had the it. And now we know that, injuries have played a major role into where he is right now at his career. But when he was injury free back then, and also again had a relationship with Mike Sullivan from in Wilkes-Barre, he had the confidence from his head coach, and that goes a long way for a goaltender. That when he got tapped on the pads to go in and replace Marc-Andre Fleury, he was all in, and that was something that, again, you hated to see Marc-Andre Fleury have to step aside, but as a player, you watch the guy that's going to replace the Flower go in there with that much confidence and to back it up. You're like, hey, we're playing for the cup. We don't really care who gets us there. We wish it was Flower, but if it's not going to be Flower and you're going to be the guy, I'm jumping on the back too.
In closing, I want to leave end things up with this, or wrap things up. A bit of good news: Evgeni Malkin and Blake Lizotte have been back on the ice. They're currently out week to week with upper body injuries. You mentioned Gino's effect on that second line, the great start he had. Since he left the lineup after scoring against Tampa Bay, the Penguins have not won a game.
That's not a coincidence. And you're right. When you talk about these leads that the Penguins have blown in third periods, who's one guy that 100% absolutely would be on the ice? Blake Lizotte, right? Yeah. And so that's not a coincidence at all. And the way that Gino's been playing, and just having him in the lineup, I think other teams prepare and play differently when we have the two-headed monster. And so now they feel like, oh, if we can just, take care of Sid, we like our chances. But you're right. And I guess that's the fragility of a lineup that like the Penguins had, that, everything in October was just so rosy, right? 8-2-2, as I mentioned. But it's funny how, you take one card out of the stack of house of cards and there's been some crumbling, right? And it just shows you that as much depth that we had and how good things were, that sometimes it can be fragile, that it was unique, it was special. And now the challenge is to get, number one, to get healthy. And then number two, to get that chemistry and get that winning feeling back again. Because we wake up in the morning and the Penguins are on the outside looking in. There was a time they were number one in the East, number one overall in the league for a couple days, battling with Colorado, right? That was back in October, but now we're outside looking into a playoff spot, and you've got Christmas break coming up, and then you've got a long break in February, and you got to get yourself back up, not only into wild card, but top 3 in the Metro. It's got to happen soon.
Bourque, it's been a pleasure to work with you in the broadcast booth over the last couple of weeks and on the desk with the pre and post game show, but nothing, absolutely nothing compares than sitting next to you, box by box, if you will, on this podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
This one's to Mikey. Give me the brandy. Enjoyed it, Dan. Good hockey talk.
Oh!